GNU Emacs is my editor of choice. It's hard to do it justice in a short video, but we have to start somewhere. It did take me 10 years before finally deciding to get into Emacs, but now it's my go-to editor for my day-to-day work. In this video, I'll try to share some of the things I wish I had been shown when first discovering Emacs, and I might have adopted it sooner. So to get started, let's install it. In this video, we're going to install it from the Ubuntu Software Center, and we're going to search for Emacs. You can also install it from the command line using apt, but let's search for it instead. So it has a list of software here. Emacs 23 is the previous version. You could install this version, but I recommend going with the latest, Emacs 24. Click install, and I'll click install anyway. And I'll need to put in my password to install it. Should only take a moment to download and install, and then we can run it from the launcher. So here I'm going to right click, and it's already locked to the launcher, so let's just click and run. And now I'll close this software center, and here we have our first session of Emacs. Now, one of the things you'll notice, it's not full screen. If you want it full screen on Ubuntu, I just recommend pressing Control, Alt, and 5 on your numeric keypad, and that will take up most of the screen. Now, the first thing that you should know is how to navigate. Now, with Emacs, getting to know the keyboard commands and doing your best to keep your hands off the mouse is the most efficient way to go. So with your hands always ready to type, you'll eventually become much quicker. So how do we navigate with just the keyboard? Well, there's two keys that are critical to this, the Control key and the Alt key. Now, in the Emacs documentation, they'll always refer to the Alt key as the M key or the meta key. So if we go to a space here, you'll see something like M and F, which means Alt-F. If you see this in the Emacs documentation, C-F, it means Control-F. Even here, if you want to create a file, visit that file with Control-X, Control-F. So Control-X, Control-F. And you'll look in the bottom in the status bar, you'll see Find File. And if I type a new file name, or let's go to Documents, this will navigate my home directory. So I just type docu and then tab, and it tabs out the rest of the documents. And now let's create a file. Let's just call this testfile.txt because it's a basic text file. So we do that. It creates this new file. Now I'm going to put a few lines, something very quick to put a few lines down. And this is a sentence. Now, how do I navigate through what I wrote? If you type Control P, it will go to the previous line. Control N goes to the next line. So you just hold the Control key down, N, 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 P, P, P. If I go Control B, it moves the cursor back. Control F moves it forward. Alt A brings it to the beginning of the paragraph. Alt E brings it to the end of the paragraph. Control A is the beginning of a line. Control E is the end of a line. And what else? Oh, cutting and pasting. The typical Control C, Control X, Control V for cut and paste does not work in Emacs. It uses its own key set. So what we do in Emacs, we press Control Space to mark the beginning of what we would like to copy. And if I go over, you'll see this is what it's going to copy, or I can just hit Control E to the end of the sentence, and then Control W to cut it, and then Control Y to paste it. Now, if I want to duplicate it, let me go back to the beginning of the line. I hit Control Space, Control E, Alt W or Meta W will copy it, and then I can move up, Control Y to paste it. So that's the basic navigation and cutting and pasting. Now, if we want to save our file from the keyboard, obviously we can grab the mouse, move the cursor over, hit File, and Save. And it shows some of the control sequences here. But I can just go Control X, Control S to save it. And if I want to exit Emacs, I go Control X, Control C, and it exits it. But let's open this up again. Now I want to get back to our file that we were editing. If I go Control X D, it will let me navigate to a directory. So I want to go to Documents in my home directory, hit Enter, and here it gives me a directory listing, and I can go up a directory or down a directory. And here I see my file. The same thing, I can go Control P or Control N to go up and down. And I see test file, I hit enter. It opens up the file I had. And let's say I delete a few things. I can delete with Control D for delete D. I can also do Control K to delete an entire line. And if I want to recover what I just had, if I do Control Shift hyphen or underscore, I can undo what I've just done. And you always have these options from the menu if you forget what the key sequence is. But try to train yourself not to use the menus and the mouse. Use it as little as possible. You'll become much quicker for it. I can do a find and replace or a search. Let's say I want to replace this with that. It will highlight what it's doing. It's on the first this. If I type Y, it will say yes to replace it. N will be no. So it's very intuitive sequences. If I'm doing a search and replace, I'll bring that up again. It defaults to the previous one. You see in the bottom, right down here, query replace default this with that. And if I just hit enter, it'll repeat the last one. Now, if I don't want to go through the whole, maybe it's a huge document and there's hundreds of instances and I want to stop halfway through, I can just do a Control G and it will quit out of that command. Now, one more thing before I let you go. If you type Meta X or Alt X and type in list packages, it will open up a list of packages that you can install or download and install from a repository called ELPA. There's a few other repositories. If you go through the Emacs documentation, you can learn about those. But there's many packages for Emacs. It's why they call it an extensible editor, because you can use the built-in programming language Emacs Lisp. It has its own Lisp that you can use to extend Emacs, and that's where it really gets its power from. Now, to find Emacs, you obviously can Google Emacs, but I'll give you the address right away. I'll open up Firefox. I'll go to gnu.org/software/Emacs. And that brings up the main homepage for Emacs, where you can learn more about it. I'll wrap this up now by saying stick with it. In the long run, you'll find yourself much faster than when you had to reach for the mouse and click through menus all the time. It really doesn't take long to become proficient with Emacs and all of the meta and control key sequences it has.